Well, these are live pictures from the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. That lunch, as we said, is now over. The president will be on his way to the White House, we believe, to begin his term as the 45th president of the United States. As you can see, the Capitol steps there lined by a military guard to escort the president to the White House. Well, to try and draw all of these strands together, let's speak now to Bill Schneider. He's a professor of public policy at George Mason University and joins us now from Washington. And Mr. Schneider, thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World. Now, first of all, let's just dig into that inaugural speech that we heard. In your opinion, do you think that was campaign Trump, transition Trump, or was that President Trump?
I think it was mostly campaign Trump. He repeated most of the things he said during the campaign, including an emphasis on using the words radical Islamic terrorism, which he says President Obama refuses to say. It was very much his campaign style, meaning that it was an angry speech and it was a very dark and bleak picture of how things are in America, with a promise that he alone could change them.
And the weather didn't help, of course, a very grey day there in Washington. Now, this was meant to be drawing people together. From what you just said, I guess you don't think that this speech did that?
No, it wouldn't draw people together. I don't think that's his style of governing. You know, he has figured out a way to turn the nation's divisiveness, the fact that America is deeply polarized, he's turning that to his political advantage. In a way, he was speaking to his base. He has a base of supporters, maybe somewhere between a quarter to a third of Americans, not a majority, who are strongly for him and are with him. He wants to hold those people with him because as long as they support him and as long as Republicans have a majority in Congress, he'll be okay, because his supporters can threaten any Republican member of Congress with a primary opponent if they are disrespectful or oppose or even criticize President Trump.
And do you think that's to the, of course, just kind of laughing in the face of those who don't want Donald Trump in the White House? So he has talked about trying to bring people together. Was that all just, to use an American term, baloney?
Yeah, more or less. He did not get where he is by bringing people together. You know, we had 4 presidents in a row who promised to bring people together, and they all failed. The first Bush, Bill Clinton, was the new Democrat in the third way. He got impeached. George W. Bush said he was going to be a uniter, not a divider. He failed. Obama said before he became president that there's no liberal or conservative America, there's just the United States of America, and he failed. Donald Trump isn't even going to try.
Okay, well, we've got your opinion on what you think he'll be nationally for Donald Trump. Let's have a little listen, Mr. Schneider, if you would, to what Donald Trump said about how America would project itself on the world. Just have a listen to this.
We will seek friendship and goodwill with the nations of the world, but we do so with the understanding that it is the right of all nations to put their own interests first. We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone, but rather to let it shine as an example. We will shine for everyone to follow.
So if you take him at his word there, it's not America imposing themselves on the world, but rather just being a beacon of hope and letting the world kind of come to them. Do you buy that?
That's right. It's by example. It's a very different kind of foreign policy speech than even Republican presidents have given. The theme which he emphasized was America first. And by that, he seems to be implying that America's world leadership role is now going to be not as strong as it was under other presidents.
Bill, is there a way that,
you know, since World War II...
Is there a way that that could be a good thing for the world, with America not stepping into every single conflagration that it finds and getting involved in and getting stuck?
It could be, and it certainly is welcome to many American voters who don't like our involvement with the rest of the world. But there is one important thing. He basically said the United States will pursue national interests. We will not pursue international interests. Well, our international interest since the late 1940s has been whenever there's a threat to international order or humanitarian values, if the United States doesn't do anything, nothing happens. Well, what Trump was saying is we're not going to take the primary responsibility for maintaining world order or upholding humanitarian values. Others will have to do that. And one consequence of that, with America stepping back from that world leadership role, is that the Russians and the Chinese are moving to fill that vacuum. They're trying to be stronger world leaders as a result.
Absolutely, and it's a return to where America was before the Second World War, this idea of isolationism, of course. This is an American trait, and it's probably been maybe a change of American policies for them to be so interventionist. Now let's talk about China in particular. Do you see that as being the main threat in terms of there being a conflict between America and another superpower going forward with Donald Trump's rhetoric?
Well, certainly he's indicated that he wants to be friendly to Russia, and he has a very strange personal relationship with Vladimir Putin that most Americans really don't comprehend. I'm not sure I do. But China has become the growing world power, an economic threat, and possibly a military threat with all of its activity in the South China Sea. Of course, his main foreign policy priority is, he articulated clearly, we will eradicate ISIS, the Islamic State, from the face of the earth. He used the term radical Islamic terrorism. During the campaign, he criticized President Obama for not calling it what he says it is, radical Islamic terrorism. That's his main mission.
And that will bring him on side with, as you say, his close friend or ally, Vladimir Putin, of course, who's trying to do that in Syria at this very moment.
Exactly. That's exactly right. He wants a cooperative relationship with Russia. With China, he's been a little bit more distant because he's basically threatening a trade war with China because they've taken so many American jobs. And he believes that he can get those jobs back. But there's likely to be a lot of tension with China and a different role for the United States in the Middle East also because the preparations are being made to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and that could be an explosive issue in the Middle East.
If Donald Trump does get closer to Vladimir Putin in Syria in terms of trying to tackle Daesh around the world, what does that mean for NATO?
Well, he has been critical of NATO. He wants other countries to pay their fair share. Basically, he raised the question that I've heard raised for decades, ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. Namely, what's the purpose of NATO? What is it there to do? Well, it did support and participate in the war in Afghanistan, and it bombed Serbia when the Kosovo crisis was very real. So there are many functions that NATO provides. What Donald Trump said is that NATO has not been at the front of the war on terror. The war on terror is something he cares deeply about, and if they're not going to participate and ally with the United States, then he's not going to have much interest in NATO.
Now, Bill Schneider, let's go on to the truth, facts. This was called the first post-truth election. Do you think Donald Trump has a bit of a loose relationship with the truth?
Well, he's certainly said a number of things, many things that are false or exaggerated. He has his own style of communication. And what he has done, and this is really a first in American politics, he has weaponized social media. Basically, he uses Twitter to communicate with his followers and to keep them rallied and keep them supportive of him. No president has ever done anything like that. And what we don't know is, will he be able to continue to send out tweets in the middle of the night when he's in the White House? Is that a security problem? Will he continue to want to do that? It's been critical to his success because it means he can go around the mainstream media, he can go around the news media and speak directly to his followers. He doesn't need broadcast news and newspapers. He can talk to them directly.
And how undermining do you think that kind of method, this Trumpism method of using Twitter, using social media to get around the mainstream media is for democracy? Because, of course, the way that America's functioned for the last 50 years is that you have a established press, that's where the truth and the facts are, and that's where you base, that's where you draw the line, and that's where you base your arguments from. How dangerous will it be for democracy and the arguments that will take place in the United States if he doesn't use that?
Well, what it is pure populism. That's what he is. This wasn't a particularly conservative speech. He didn't run a particularly conservative campaign, although a lot of his appointments, most of them have been deeply conservative. But the fact is, this speech was all about populism, giving power back to the people. It was opposed to the Washington establishment. It was a very dark and often negative speech, saying the people have seen their power stolen away from them. I'm going to restore the power of the people. Populism is really his commitment and his ideology.
And do you think he'll have the opportunity to do that? Of course, he said he's going to bring back jobs, bring back coal jobs, which I don't know where he's going to find those from. But one thing that did interest me is this talk of infrastructure. Surely if he starts building roads, building airports, building new train lines, that will bring jobs back and bring back the right jobs. So perhaps that'll be a good thing.
It will be, but it's likely to be temporary. You know, once you start on infrastructure projects, and in a matter of years, we don't know how many, but certainly a few years, those jobs aren't going to last. But Democrats like what Trump is saying about rebuilding infrastructure. It means government jobs, and Democrats have always supported that. Republicans are a little bit skeptical. To them, to Republicans, spending is spending, whether it's done on jobs and public works or whether it's done for social welfare purposes. So on that, he really has some differences with the Republican Party. But he is determined to do that. He repeated it today. In a way, it's the same tradition as Franklin Roosevelt used to fight the Depression back in the 1930s. It's government spending.
Absolutely, maybe a New Deal. Okay, so finally, Mr. Schneider, then what do you think we will see in the next maybe 100 days and 4 years, if I can ask you to look that far ahead, for a Donald Trump presidency?
Well, what he's going to be occupied with is mostly eradicating the legacy of Barack Obama. They're not going to be able to do that at a stroke. He can't do that by simply signing a law to repeal Obamacare, because he has to replace it with something. But they're going to do everything possible to just erase Obama's legacy. That means he'll begin signing repeals of Obama's executive orders on things like immigration, climate change. Congress will take up an agenda of canceling a lot of the laws, like the Obamacare health care law and Dodd-Frank, which regulated Wall Street. Just about everything Obama did is going to be challenged, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, but that is a very full agenda for the first 100 days.
Absolutely, it's going to be a very interesting 100 days and 4 years to come. Professor Bill Schneider from George Mason University, thank you for